You know, we always have those Mount Rushmore discussions with our friends. At least I know I do. My name is Murph. Welcome to my Rushmore Picks. This is where I discuss different Mount Rushmore topics. And the one thing about any Mount Rushmore discussion that I've always noticed is you could pick the three no-brainers that go on Mount Rushmore of said topic, but it's always that fourth one that's always going to create a lot of controversy, or a lot of people aren't going to agree with you. And that's why these Mount Rushmore discussions are so awesome, because everyone has their own opinions, everyone has their own thoughts, and nobody is wrong. It just goes by your feeling. So let's kick things off. Something I noticed recently was Billboard put out the 100 greatest country artists of all time list. And of course, they had certain parameters that they set, including focusing primarily on mainstream country artists instead of embracing adjacent genres like Americana or bluegrass. And also, commercial success was a factor. Artistry, longevity, and enduring influence counted just as much. They also stated because it's too early to gauge the long-term impact of many of the newer acts, the list leans more towards the artists whose place in country music history is already secure. So it got me thinking, who would be on the Mount Rushmore of country artists of all time? You know, Billboard, according to Billboard, it would be number one, Dolly Parton. That's who came in number one for them. Number two was Johnny Cash. Number three, Willie Nelson. And number four, Loretta Lynn. Now, rounding out the top 10 would be number 5, Hank Williams Sr., number 6, The Possum, George Jones, number 7, Garth Brooks, number 8, Charlie Pride, number 9, The King, George Strait, and then wrapping things up in the top 10 is Merle Haggard, Mr. Dukes of Hazzard himself. And the writers gave their reasoning as to why they believe these are the artists that should be in the top 100. Now, there were some snubs, and we'll get into that. But being that we're discussing Mount Rushmore here, let's talk about the 4 picks that Billboard would make on their Mount Rushmore of greatest country artists of all time. Dolly Parton, Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, and Loretta Lynn. So they talk about Dolly Parton. They said there's never been anyone like her. I would agree with that. I mean, you can make strong argument for possibly Reba, maybe. But they also wrote an unparalleled combination of extraordinary talent, fierce ambition, iconic country Barbie look, and sheer goodness. Dolly Parton is one of the finest songwriters in country or any other genre. As we all know, Whitney Houston's famous I Will Always Love You is a rendition of Dolly Parton's huge hit. And who could forget about Jolene and 9 to 5, right? So that's the reasoning behind their number 1. Number 2, Johnny Cash. Hey, he's the man in black. They wrote that Cash became known as the paperless vocalist and an artist of consequential music who advocated for the overlooked and disdained. I mean, all his hits, Walk the Line, Ring of Fire, Folsom Prison Blues, you name it. The list goes on for the man in black. Definitely, I could see deserving to be on that Mount Rushmore as well. So let's go to number 3 for Billboard magazine. They chose Willie Nelson, Mr. Outlaw himself, where they wrote that he's philanthropist, philosopher, actor, advocate for family farmers and pot. Also an American icon. They say that Nelson shaped country music and the wider culture since the early 60s when he wrote hits like Crazy, which Patsy Cline took to number 9 on the Hot 100 charts in 1961. While a great pioneer like Hank Williams shot across the scene like a comet dying at 29, Willie Nelson has been like a North Star, steadily shining through the decades. So that would be their reasoning behind putting Willie Nelson on their Rushmore list. And then they go to number 4, Loretta Lynn, where they wrote that Loretta Lynn was an early advocate for women's rights through songs like 1975's controversial and mind-blowing The Pill about the form of contraception. She took a backseat to no one, including predatory women who came in looking for her man, back in 1968's Fifth City. So that gives their reasoning for Loretta Lynn being the fourth member on Mount Rushmore for them. Now, if you want to go a little deep in the weeds, as I was looking at their top 100, there were some things that I thought were quite interesting. One, FGL did not make the top 100 list at all. Florida Georgia Line did not make that. Arguably, the complete paradigm shift of the country bubble was started from FGLs. One can make that argument very easily. I believe they had like 18 straight number one songs when they first came out. Obviously, they broke up, but hard to understand why they didn't make that list. Jason Aldean was absent from the list. Taylor Swift got to number 41. I think she should have been a lot higher than that. There were definitely some interesting choices on Billboard's part. It made me think, who would I put on Mount Rushmore of the greatest country artists of all time? And although mine might be a little different from Billboard's top 4 choices, I do think that they're valid reasoning for putting Dolly Parton, Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, and Loretta Lynn in the top 4 on their Mount Rushmore as we're discussing. But for me personally, I could see the validity behind Dolly Parton, of course. Yes, she would go on Mount Rushmore. Johnny Cash, Man in Black, yeah. How could you not put him up there? I would say number 3 for me, I would put the king himself, George Strait. I mean, George Strait on this list for Billboard was at number 9. Here's a man who transcended decades and decades with number ones. He's had over 60 number one hits. They call him the king for a reason. I don't understand why he was in 9th. Billboard even wrote that George Strait has more number one country song hits than any other artist for 30 years. I mean, think about his catalog. You got Amarillo by Morning, you got The Chair, you got The Fireman, Oceanfront Property, the list goes on and on. So for that reason, I feel like the king, George Strait, needs to go up on Mount Rushmore and be the third member of Mount Rushmore, of my Rushmore picks. And that brings it down to the final one. Now, this is where the arguments come. This is where the discussions always stem from. People can't fault your arguments for the top 3 of your Rushmore picks. But when it comes to that 4th one, there's always controversy and why they would choose someone else. And that's why these discussions for Mount Rushmore of insert topic here are so good, because they stir up healthy conversations and debates. So with that said, I'm going to divulge my 4th member of Mount Rushmore on my Rushmore picks for greatest country artists of all time. And it's actually Billboard's number 7 pick, Garth Brooks. I think when you break it down to the nuts and bolts, in my opinion, Garth Brooks deserves to be on the Mount Rushmore of greatest country artists of all time. And the simple reason is he made country cool. In the 90s, he was the 90s. Alternative music had their grunge scene in the 90s. Garth Brooks was crossing over into mainstream. He was Taylor Swift before Taylor Swift. He scored several Diamond certified albums. That's over 10 million copies sold. Think about it. Game-changing blockbuster albums, No Fences, Rope in the Wind. Garth was the best-selling solo artist in U.S. history. The man was the 90s. 7-time Entertainer of the Year award winner for the CMAs. And you can't tell me that when you enter a bar and you hear Friends in Low Places start playing, you're not singing along. It's as iconic of a song as Def Leppard's Pour Some Sugar on Me and Bon Jovi's Living on a Prayer. But that's just one of his major hits. He had The Dance, he had The Thunder Rolls, Unanswered Prayers, Papa Loved Mama, Ain't Going Down, Callin' Baton Rouge. And if you remember, in 1997, Garth Brooks made history when his free Central Park concert had over an estimated 1 million people attending. Now think about that for a second. 1997, New York City, country music was not as prevalent in New York as it is today. That man, Garth Brooks, he got over 1 million people to come to Central Park for a free show. That tells you something. I mean, when you think country music, you think Nashville, you think the South, Texas, Georgia. But for Garth to draw 1 million people in New York City at Central Park speaks volumes to me. Now, I know you're going to say, oh, Murph, what about that whole Chris Gaines debacle? All right, I'll give you that. But we're talking about Garth Brooks as a country artist, and he deserves, in my opinion, to be on the Mount Rushmore of greatest country artists of all time. That is why I put him on my Rushmore pick. Now, this is where the debate comes, is like there's some people who are on the outside looking in who definitely deserve to be on Rushmore. And you could easily make the argument for Willie Nelson and Loretta Lynn being on Mount Rushmore, just like Billboard put them on there. You can make an argument for George Jones as well to be up there. But me personally, I feel like no one did more for country music at their time than Garth Brooks, because he spanned the entire decade of the 90s. The entire 90s was Garth Brooks. Sure, you can make the argument for Taylor Swift as well. Absolutely. What she did for country music, game changer as well. But would you remove Johnny Cash for Taylor Swift? Or would you remove Garth for Taylor Swift? Or Dolly Parton? I mean, you can't remove the king. I really do feel that George Strait deserves to be on there. 60 number one songs. You really cannot take him off of Rushmore. 30 years of number one hits. That's a lot. But this is the reason why we make these Mount Rushmore picks and have these debates with each other, whether we're in the barbershop or just with friends. You can do a Mount Rushmore for anything, almost anything pretty much. And my Rushmore picks this go around for greatest country artists of all time and their footprint that they made in country music are as follows: as Dolly Parton, Johnny Cash, the King, George Strait, and Garth. Now, I'd love to hear your Rushmore picks. Go ahead and email me at myrushmorepicks@gmail.com. Curious to know your reasoning behind them, whether you agree with me or disagree with me. Also, follow us on socials and comment there at myrushmorepicks. I'm sure I'm going to hear some people agreeing with me, but more people disagreeing with me. But I want to know the reason why. Tell me, give me valid reasons why. And it's just your opinion as it is my opinion. So there's no harm, no foul. This is just open for discussion. Thanks for taking the time to check out my Rushmore picks. I am Murph. I will catch you next time with another My Rushmore pick for you.